Victoria Aveyard, welcome to Head on Fire. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Me too. Congratulations right up front on your new book, your adult
Oh,
debut.
thank you. It is it's kind of you to call it a book. It's like 5 chapters right now. But I have a very detailed synopsis, more so than I've ever had before for a book. So that's really interesting because I sometimes when you're writing, you get so deep into it, you kind of forget where it's going. And I have to hold this to have the synopsis open in another document to be like, look, you have a path. Don't go off the rails. You
That's me with
sold it.
my like 800 notes app tabs.
Mhm.
Like, oh, these are yeah. Is there anything you can is there anything you can tell us about the new book? You have a lot of Easter eggs.
I do, and they're very, very obvious Easter eggs, but we're hoping to ramp those up towards the end of September because we probably won't be able to announce anything until October.
Is it
Partially
next
because,
year? Do you have a is it
oh yes, release date wise, we have a goal. It would not be in 2025. It would be
Yay, I don't have to compete against you. Well, you're adult, so that's fine.
no, the idea is the hope is to get a first draft in by March. That would
Oh, that's
be right.
Well,
So we have a
good
lot of
luck and
time.
congratulations. That's
Thank
such a
you.
big thing. And
It
that's
is.
actually, you have been, I wanted to focus on the parts of the job of being an author that people like don't talk about or people like don't think apply to authors who have reached a certain like stratosphere of success,
Mhm.
which I think is very fair to say that you absolutely have. Um, because you in quietly announcing your new book, you have been very honest with your readers about your submission process. You have been
Mhm.
very honest with your readers about like, everything that it took to get to this point for you. Um, but before I get to that, I want to ask, how do you define success and do you think you've had a successful career?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've had more success in this creative sort of career that is no stability and no guarantees than I would ever think. I've said this before, but I sort of feel like a kid who, when you were 7 or 8 years old and wanted to be an astronaut, and now I have like been to the moon several times. But at the same time, you want to keep going to the moon. And that's sometimes the difficult part. I get a lot of questions from newer authors who are like, how do you maintain this career? What's your advice for longevity in this career? And I'm like, longevity? What the fuck? Because we don't think of it as sort of like, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years
Yeah.
now. How do you keep doing it? Because you're sort of laying track ahead of a speeding train, and you always want to sort of stay ahead of it and keep producing more and more. One thing a lot of us say is we're all kind of building our fortresses, and very, very few of us feel safe in our fortresses, which is a little depressing to think about, but I don't know. I never want to get to a place where I feel as nice as it would be. I never want to take it for granted, this job. I
Mm.
never want to feel like something is going to be a given because I don't think that way. I'm sort of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I've from the moment I got my first book deal, or even when I signed with my agent, can sort of been waiting for the bottom to fall out, which is not healthy. But I think it helps me compartmentalize a little bit because it would be really easy to get high on your own supply. And I never want to do that. And it helps that I love the work and that I would be writing creatively if I wasn't being paid for it, albeit, much slower and sadder. But it's nice to get to do what I feel like I was put on earth to do and get paid for it.
I wanted to be a stage magician when I was a
Ah.
kid. So that's not, I'm not any of those things. So that's, but so talking about new authors, you said that people ask you for advice. I'm sure that you get asked that all the time. How do you recommend that a new author define success for themselves?
I'm pretty pragmatic about it. The idea that I can support myself solely through writing, that to me is a big hallmark of success. Like, this is my only job. This is how I pay my bills. This is what I pay my taxes on.
Mhm.
And that makes it feel very, very successful to me. I know that is very rare in our industry to be able to support yourself solely based on your creative endeavors. So it really comes down to the individual and what success feels like for you, because for a lot of people it's getting the agent, it's publishing the book, it's seeing it on the shelf in a Barnes and Noble. one of like the delights and curses of this job is that the goalposts are always moving, and you do tell yourself, I'll be so happy when this thing happens. And then if it does happen, you're like, wait a second, I want that next thing and that next thing and that next thing. And then you get to that place where you're like, well, why do they have that thing and I don't have that thing? And that's a really, really tough spiral to go down. So I fix my measure of success at, I can support myself doing this, and the other things are wonderful to want and endeavor for and try and get. But as long as I can still do this, and this is how I'm able to live, I'll be very, very happy.
You just brought up that idea of comparison, of
Mhm.
comparing yourself to other authors and say, well, I want what they have. Speaking of Red Queen, everybody knows, anybody who's listening to this knows Red Queen, your first hit series. It hit when you were young, very
Yeah.
young.
Yeah.
It was right after college.
24. I was 24 when it came out, and I was 22 when I sold. Yes, 22 when I sold the manuscript and 24 when it came out.
I'm so
Um,
glad that none of my 22-year-old writing is out there, at least on enough scale. My 22-year-old writing was poetry, which nobody reads, so I'm safe. But
I'm not.
a lot of folks look at cases like yours, the one
Mhm.
getting published at such an early age, and two
Right,
hitting as big as Red Queen did,
right.
and think, oh no, I've missed it.
Yeah.
So,
Oh God.
what is
It
your advice on dealing with comparison and jealousy?
it is, well, one thing that helps me with jealousy is telling myself that's a very natural feeling. So instead of, beating yourself up for feeling jealous or trying to suppress it, I sort of say, like, this is a normal thing to have. This is a very human
Mm,
emotion. Everyone is going to feel this way. How do we use this in a positive manner? So instead of like being jealous of an individual author, it's like, well, what can I take from this? Oh, that is something I really want. How do I get there? Oh, that's something that is possible. How do I get there? Oh, that's something, and this is more of the business sense. That's something that's possible for a publisher to do. How do
mm,
I tell my publisher, let's think about something along these lines? So it's making the jealousy help you versus hold you back or make you really bitter. I always think there's like a bit of a difference between jealousy and envy is the more corrosive side of things. So whenever someone says, "Oh, I don't get jealous or I don't compare," that's bullshit. We all do it. It's just figuring out a way to allow those emotions without letting them, rot you a little bit. And I'm still working on that. I still get very bitter sometimes,
you ever
even though
jealous of your
very
younger
little.
self?
Not so much. I am more so very, very happy that that book hit the way it did when I knew nothing and didn't really know what to be nervous about or
Yeah,
what
yeah.
bullets I was dodging. And I didn't really have any idea of what levers were being pulled and what milestones were being reached until after the fact. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have messed something up, or I would have been so much more psychologically affected. I do think the thing that really helped me the most, especially when that book blew up, is I didn't really think of it as a massive thing because at the time I was 24 years old. I was living with my best friends from college, and I was still kind of like just living the lifestyle of a 20 something. And,
Hmm.
I had two roommates, and they're just like, yeah. And then she just hit the New York Times list, and now we're going to the bar. And I think having a circle around me who were not in the publishing space, who were not in the writing world, who could be proud of me and excited for me and supportive of me, but at the same time were like, I don't know anything about what's going on. And I would be like, let me tell you the publishing drama today. And they'd be like, that sounds really dumb. Moving right along. Like they were PhD students and pre-med and biomedical engineers. And it was just like really good to have that sort of circle of touch grass people who I still am
Mm.
very, very close with. I'm sure you know this too, but you can kind of tell from an author's social media whose majority social outlet is virtual. I think that can be a real detriment, especially to aspiring writers and new writers, is realizing that this ecosystem, um, while there are so many bright spots and so many positives, can also be kind of miserable. And so you got to take everything as balanced as you can, and definitely maintain a circle outside this to help you stay grounded.
You've talked a lot about how much of your private life you almost regret sharing with social
Mhm.
media, how much. And what's funny is people with platforms the size that we have, people think they know us like
Yes.
really well. And then what's funny is I'll talk about like my husband, or I'll talk about the horses, or I'll talk, and people are like, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah, that's because I am very careful. Like, y'all think that you have this window into my life and you see this much of it, this
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and that's not recent, but still kind of within like almost the last 5, 6 years. Because when I started, Twitter was the big thing, and there was a little bit more of
Well,
a
that's text, but it's
separation.
easy. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
looking in your house.
right, right. So now the parasocial sort of relationships are becoming more intense, and then
Mhm,
there's also these projections of expectations onto us. And this is like a very much a double-edged sword that I have both cut and been cut by,
mhm.
where you want someone to be everything and say everything correctly and have an opinion on everything. And then when that comes back around, that's really tough. And it's a lesson that we all kind of learn is this is very much a live by the sword, die by the sword industry, especially when it comes to like inter-colleague relationships. And I try to keep that in mind now, where it's like, oh man, I just saw someone I know subtweet me, but you're like, I've done that in the past too, and it sucks. And I know it feels sucky, and I'm never going to do that again because I know what it feels like.
It's never been me.
You just do it in the DMs.
Directly to your face.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of New York Times lists, speaking of lists and success, people historically have viewed lists as markers of success.
Mhm.
You are no stranger to a New York Times bestseller list
Touch
yourself.
wood.
Yep.
Thank you.
And how much weight though? I mean, it's of course it's easy to comment on this, having had the privilege of being on it and getting to stick that in your bio and everything. But in all honesty, for prospective authors or maybe for readers who think that this is a big thing for them, how much weight should people place on getting on a list? And for
Mhm.
authors, how do you deal with falling off or never hitting it?
Right. So I know for me, list day for a new release is always very nerve-wracking and very
Mm,
scary. And I am constantly either refreshing my email or checking my phone, and there's no givens, at least in my brain, there's no givens for what's going on. And especially with this last book, because we were popping over to series, and that's an even tougher list. I was really nervous. And then the list was late, and I was like 2 hours late, and I was like, oh, I didn't make it. Okay, I'm gonna have like let's get through it. We're gonna psychologically, let this happen. And then I got an email that was like, just so you know, we're gonna call right now, but and I was
you get
like,
a
I will.
call,
Mhm.
they call you and say, hey, by the way, you made the list. You're not just like,
So
it's not like
if
cheerleading tryouts and everybody's rushing to the list.
no, so
You can
usually
tell I've made the
if
list many
you're
times.
if you're one, you'll get a call.
Oh,
At least I can only
wow.
speak for my personal experience with my publisher at HarperCollins, but if you're one, you get a call, especially if it's one of like the first in a series. So I remember the one for Red Queen, that phone call came while I was on my first book tour ever. I was in Chicago in my hotel room, kind of getting ready for an event, and my editor called, and I heard it was the whole office on the phone with my agent, and they were like, "You're number one." And back then, that was a different list too, because that wasn't YA hardcover, that was YA period. So you
Wow.
were on there with like John Green movie tie-ins, and
Yeah.
I think I'm still the only non-IP to debut at number one, or the only debut author to debut at number one on that particular list. And then they changed it like 6 months later to be YA hardcover, so I never had to run that gauntlet ever again. So that was crazy, but I didn't really understand what it meant until I went downstairs and met the other two authors I was on tour with at the bar, and they were like, "Are you kidding?" And then I was like, "Oh wait, and still was on tour, so you don't really have time to think about it." And now every list day is a nerve-wracking day. As far as the lists go, I think the more important thing versus hitting the list, getting that number for a week, obviously it is really, really valuable to be able to put
Sure.
that New York Times bestseller next to your name. And that is a fantastic accomplishment and like a huge boon to your career and also to you as a person. Like, who doesn't want that? The more important thing is long-term sales and legs. And I don't know what the algorithm is for, or the sort of potion, the formula for the New York Times list is, but there's some like funny business in terms of how the numbers are calculated, which stores report. The list is always a little bit different from either BookScan or the USA Today list. And so you kind of have to go off of all three. There are books that will sell more than whatever is number 10, but won't hit 10 on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, I really don't want anyone to sort of put all their eggs in the basket of I must list or my career is over, because that's absolutely not the case. And there are so many authors, journeyman authors, who make great livings, have built wonderful careers, who have never listed but are continuously like selling and selling at a fantastic pace that long term you're going to sell more books than someone who, say, flash in a pan, hit one for 1 week and dropped away. So it is really hard to pin your self-worth onto that. However, we do work in an industry where unfortunately our self-worth is very, very tied to something completely subjective. And that is fun. And that is what our group therapy session will be about.
So you have been, like I said at the top, you've been very open with your audience that this new book went out on submission, which
Mhm.
was your first time back in that subspace since your debut.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
That's that, how many
I'm
authors can say that?
employed. I'm employed for, or I'm being paid for at least 4 more years. So
Hey,
I feel very happy about that. That's how I always look at these, is like I have a job for at least this amount of time. Hooray.
but
Uh
you've also been open during that submission process about the fact that you received some rejections, which a lot of folks in your comment section were very surprised about, but
yeah.
authors were not. So I think I think that news surprised people, but rejection is a part of like every creative's
Yeah.
journey. So I'd like to reframe the concept of rejection for anybody who might be listening. So I want to ask both how you handle rejection, maybe a quick explainer of why you get
Yeah.
rejections and the value of rejection in a creative career.
Well, specifically when speaking to a submission or trying to get your book placed with an editor, you want someone who is willing to go to hell and back for the book. And someone who rejects is not willing to do that. So it's a really, really tough silver lining of this person was not going to be the champion.
Mhm.
And we should be happy that they are willing to admit they are not your champion. And then in terms of my submission specifically, we went into it with a very full deck of cards in terms of like what I bring to the table, my history, the book I was trying to sell, and having an established like platform and fandom and a lot of things that most authors do not have. So we knew we were going to go in with at least some offers. People were going to be interested. The challenge was going to be who is interested enough. So at least in this submission, the rejections, while you're always going to be like, why? It was, okay, thank you for telling me you are not going to be dedicated enough to this. This is not hitting the buttons for you.
Mhm.
And that is a good thing for us to know, because you could very easily come in here and fight for it and not be the right fit. And you're going to make a decision even more difficult for me, or potentially land me with someone who isn't the right fit. So in terms of my submission, it was like, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it. In terms of general submission rejections, I would just take it as they were not the right person for this book. And it could be because maybe the book's not ready. Maybe this isn't the book that you are meant to publish, or it could be because it simply didn't gel with them in the right way, and you need to find the person that it does gel with.
Especially if it's like your first manuscript. I don't think people realize that so few like first manuscripts are the first
Yeah,
to publish. Like my
yeah,
first novel is not, mm-mm.
right.
It's going to sit on a shelf for a while until I'm a better writer so that I can
Yes,
fix it.
yes.
Yeah.
And there's a misconception, I think, more the as we are the publishing industry is expanding beyond traditional publishing. We have indie publishing, we have hybrid publishing. The waters are getting a little muddy as to what things mean and what an
Mhm.
editor is and what acquisitions is at a publishing house. And there's actually there's not as many agents operating in, say, the traditional publishing sphere as people think there are, who
Mm.
are actually operating at the level where they are getting books sold, where they are advocating for their clients, and where they are just like operating in that atmosphere essentially. And the same can be said of editors. It is a scarce industry. It works on scarcity. It works on you feeling like grateful for being picked. It just kind of comes with the territory. And one thing I do see, and I know you see this too, is so many aspiring authors being taken advantage of by people who are going to scam them, who are going to take their money, and or not even scam them, like could have truly like, I want to be an editor too, and this is my dream, but aren't actually suited to get your book where it should go. So it
Mhm.
is really difficult to navigate and kind of figure out what are the paths. And I think people have to be super honest with themselves as to what they want and where they see their book hitting. I know there are a lot of people who specifically want to work in indie publishing and want that path, and that is fantastic, or want traditional publishing and want that path, and that is fantastic. The problem comes when you don't really know which one you want, or say you want to go trad, but you are doing indie publishing things. That can make the obstacles much more difficult for you, and vice versa.
I think that one of the toughest things for a person who wants to be a professional creative to hear is wanting it is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
have to be good at it, and you
Yeah.
have to be good at like the craft of it. Like you have to
Yeah.
be good at the technical stuff. You have to be good at you have to be good at and you know what's so funny is when I say this, people are like, well, I read terrible books all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, one, that's subjective. And two, it's probably a lot better written than a lot
Yeah.
of stuff out there. Just because you didn't like it doesn't mean it wasn't like technically good or good enough. But I think that a lot of people struggle, like folks that say, oh, I think I want to try being an editor. I want to
Yeah.
try being an agent. I really, I'm not having a lot of luck in submission or something. And I
Mhm.
think what a lot of people don't understand is like that writing isn't strong enough right now.
Right.
It's not
Right.
strong enough.
I think of the metaphor, and this is another like, oh, I love to stay grounded. This is a little bit like gassing ourselves up. But the authors you see who are visible, who are hitting lists, who are selling a lot of books, who have readers, who have dedicated readers who are coming with them from book to book, they are about as rare as NFL players. And you are not playing in the NFL because you want to. You are
Mm.
playing in the NFL because you are talented, because you are hardworking, and because you are lucky. And those are
Mm.
also the same three things that I think every working successful writer has is luck, talent, and they are able to do the work. You will never have longevity in this career without all three of those things. I talk about that a lot. And I don't know where this sort of disconnect comes where, we look at award-winning actors and Olympians and fantastic athletes and people who are so highly skilled in their industries or in their talents, and we think, oh, I could never do that. But a lot of people look at writing and think, oh, I can do that. And there's this weird, no, a lot of us are existing in a space that it takes a really long time to get there. And even if you do everything right, if you don't have one of those three things, it will fall apart. And so it's almost like, I don't know, it's hard to give that advice of like, but you also have to be like good at this.
Yeah. What's so funny is that like even though in our industry like you do still come up with a physical object, like there is still a book at like a physical
Yeah.
thing at the end, but it's not like being a baker. Like if you say, "Oh,
Hmm.
I want to be a baker," and it's like, "Okay,
Right.
well, here's your cake and here's a professional baker's cake."
Yeah.
Do you see the difference? Do you
Yeah.
see how now, but these are all skills and you can learn these skills. You're just going to have to work on it. And some people get here a little faster.
Hmm.
Some people get here a little slower. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And they're all valid and fine and good, but you do still have to get here before you can
Right.
sell cake.
And I think it's really frustrating for us as well. And
Mhm.
I wonder if this is why we're seeing a lot of like, download my guide to becoming a published author, because there is no there is no step-by-step path. It's not like becoming a lawyer. It's not like becoming a doctor or a teacher. There's no do this, then this, now you have the job. There's nothing like
I
that
thought it was 50,000 followers on social.
so fun. Yeah,
Sorry.
and it's just like not having enough followers. If you have a stellar book, no one's going to turn away a stellar book because you don't have enough followers on
Well,
Instagram.
clearly you had so many followers whenever you wrote Red Queen, right? You had
Listen,
so many.
that was, oh God, how many years ago? 12 years ago, or 11 years ago when I signed with my agent. And yes, the industry has very much changed. And so I totally get the critique of like, you don't know how it is out there anymore. And you know what? You're right. But I know that no one is turning away a kick-ass book because you
Noted.
don't have enough Instagram followers. That's just what it is. And if
Well, I
someone,
will say, I mean, I was just when I sat down for my first meeting with my editor for my next book, she had no, she was sitting there like explaining to me, well, so by the way, so some of our authors find it beneficial to get on social media. So if you aren't, you should. I was like, my agent and I kind of looked at each other. We're like, oh,
yeah, in my
you're welcome. By the way,
in my
here, I'm about to give you a gift.
yes,
Congratulations. Well, you're
yes, that
welcome.
must have felt nice. In my submission, I even said, like, what are your expectations for social media? Because I know I am very present on social media and I do a lot of work in this space, but I'm hoping to pull back a little bit more. And I don't want to sell you almost like a false bill of goods of like, I'm going to consistently be like this. And they were like, oh no, do whatever you want.
Victoria
So,
Aveyard in a bikini with her new adult.
oh God. Once I did post, like we were stand-up paddleboarding, a couple of friends and I posted a picture and someone commented, it's so nice to see real women's bodies on Instagram. And I wanted to be like, thank you, but fuck you. And we still talk about that.
Somebody in the comments called me like somebody's like like the online gay dad or something, and I was like,
I'm not a dad.
I just a baby. What are you
I know.
doing? So
Oh, that when mother became a thing, and I was like, why are they calling me mother?
creatives have to have a little bit of an ego, a little bit more self-confidence, at least to overcome that inner voice that we're all like,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
ingrained in us that tells us it's okay to reach, but not too high because reaching too high is some kind of moral failing.
Yes. And be
We talked,
grateful. Be grateful for what you have.
yes.
Don't push for more, even if this feels like the
Mhm.
wrong thing. You don't advocate for yourself. Just be happy that you've gotten to the place you've gotten to. That is very much weaponized against us.
You talked a little bit about this earlier, but I want to dive farther into it. This whole like self-confidence can lead to both wanting to surround yourself with people that are like you, highly
Mhm.
motivated, other creatives, yada yada, and also wanting to surround yourself with people who simply do not care at
Yes.
all. Do
Yes.
you do this, and how do you keep that balance?
It helps. I feel like I got very lucky in that when I moved home after college, but I had a very, very strong group of friends in Los Angeles. And when I moved home, we kind of call that year I was home writing my book, my lost year. And I came as soon as I sold the book, I came kind of running back to LA from small town Massachusetts, which no longer felt like home to me.
Mm,
But I came back and that sort of group and found family very much, existed and we were all there for each other. For the most part, we were all transplants to Los Angeles. So we were each other's support system, having a group of 10, 15 really close friends, all of us in very diverse industries, kind of running the board between, this person works in business, in business, and this person is a biomedical engineering PhD, and this person is a resident and in medical school. That was really helpful. But then also I did find my author sort of circle as well. And those are the people who are super, super valuable. One, keep your venting to the group chat to run to run things by them and be like, hey, is this weird? Am I reacting incorrectly? Or is this actually bad behavior on the part of
mm,
my publisher or my agent or this person that I'm working
mhm,
with or this reviewer? Is this okay? That's what I really love, is to have that sounding board of people you trust to either validate your feelings or be like, hey, take a step back. It's not personal. Or actually, this thing is pretty normal and it sucks,
mm.
but you're not being singled out in any way.
Right.
That's very
This
valuable.
is
And
just the crappy part of the industry. Welcome.
the crappy
Congrats.
part of the industry. And we get that question of like, well, how do you find the group chat? How do you get these people? And of course, it's different now than when I was coming up 11 years ago. It
Sure.
started on like Twitter and just entering conversations, which you have to be, I mean, it's easier to do virtually than it is in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Um, But then once I was really on the publishing circuit, that was helpful. I remember right before Red Queen came out, I went to Winter Institute, which is one of sort of the industry conventions. And I was there with a lot of authors that were debuting. The traditional publishers kind of choose like their lead titles and send them to a lot of these events. And so a bunch of us ended up on the circuit together. And I remember that was where I first met Sabati here. She and I debuted together, and we have been such good friends for 10 years
I
now.
got
She's a truly lovely, wonderful person. And one thing in this industry is you will see a lot of people who are kind of shitheads succeed, and you're just like, ugh. And then you will see people who truly deserve it, who are wonderful and talented, succeed. And she's one of those people who you're just like, I'm so happy to cheer you on. You deserve every inch of this. And she's like delightful and has not changed an inch in the 10 years since she debuted. So that was cool. Is like, I met her very, very early. I met Renee Ajay very, very early. And then once you're on the circuit, at least for your certain year, you meet a lot of the same people over and over again. It's almost like we're going to work conventions together. And it can be really hard in person. I'm actually quite shy in person, especially when I'm first meeting people or at events.
really?
Yes, and actually I've gotten from many people, oh, I thought you were a huge bitch. And I was like, no, I was just like really shy and went off
Okay,
and
I get that too, but it's
to
only
speak
because
to
I
the one
am.
person I know, and you get that kind of, and then it's like, no, 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 that's I was just like
Mhm.
really holding it together. But I became really good friends with Soman Chainani and Alex Bracken and Susan Dennard and Lee Bardugo. I remember my first real festival was a Y'all West. And the two people who like checked on me in the green room, because I wasn't really talking to anybody, because I was at the end of my second tour in 3 months in my debut year, and I was just kind of like, ah. And it was Lee Bardugo and Veronica Roth, who both were like, how are you doing? How's your debut year going? Do you need anything? Do you have any questions? Let's be friends. And that's kind of what it is. It's
Those
a
are
lot.
some names.
I know, I know. And we all share an agency, so I'm pretty sure their agents were like, hey, check on her.
Oh,
I have that sneaking suspicion. But it was one of those things where it was like, now in hindsight, as we become quote more veteran, you remember who did that for you and what it meant, and so you also try to do the same while balancing like, hey, now I have real friends in this industry who I get to see like twice a year, and I am going to prioritize chatting with them in the green room, but
yeah.
very happy to meet anyone and answer questions. The challenge is just finding those people you trust. I will say, go into every relationship, and this is very cynical of me, protecting your own neck. Like, don't put anything in writing that you wouldn't be comfortable having come out. Just be smart about things, especially if it's new relationships. Don't
It
be a
takes a
weirdo.
while to
Be
figure
like
out
a
if somebody
fun
has your best
weirdo.
interests at mind, or
Yeah.
if it's somebody slid into your DMs because like, hey, your
Yeah.
follower count is this big and mine is
Yeah.
only this big, and maybe,
Yes.
hey, could I,
Yeah.
you, of course, usually it's you can tell if somebody slides into your DMs and within like the first 5 minutes there's like, hey, can I send you, oh, okay, I see what this is, I get it.
Yes. That's tough and just kind of comes with the territory, but I really advocate having both your sort of touch grass people who can sit there while you say, guess what happened today on threads? And they'll be like, I don't know how your industry functions, and this sounds insane. Or the people who you can be like, guess what happened on threads? And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. So you
That's me
have,
downloading to my husband. Like I have to, like the
yes,
amount of backstory that I have to give my husband to get him to understand anything at all in publishing. I'm like, okay, so you know this movie. Okay, well, the author that wrote this book did, and then I have to like get him to care.
yes. It's exactly the same with my husband. There have been a couple of like ongoing ones where I'm like, do you want to hear the update? And he'll have to be
Yes,
like, not is that the racist or the AI? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna tell you and you figure it out.
yes, yeah. What did you think was a make or break your career moment that
Ooh.
in retrospect turned out not to be?
Oh, that it turned out not to be. I definitely know what like the real make or breaks were.
Well, I was going to ask you that second, but I want to
Okay.
answer in whichever order you want, because I think that when you're going into this, you think that certain things are going to be like, well, I have to do this, or I have to impress this
Mhm.
person, or if I get this bad review
Yeah.
here, like my whole career's over. And then it's like you survive it, and it's like, oh, that
I
There's
guess
nothing.
I can think of two. I've never gotten a star, never had a starred review. And I know that's something a lot of people place great stock in. And obviously I would
That's
love
the
to.
Kirkus one, right?
Yeah, there's like Kirkus and
Oh,
there's library journal, the school library journal. There's a couple. And I've never been, on awards lists or anything like that. But that's totally fine. And I know, especially when those like end of year awards lists come out or whatever,
totally
people get
fine.
very down on themselves. And so I would say, I don't look for starred reviews when reviews start coming in because I just know like it's not going to happen. That's clearly not the kind of books that I write, and that's okay. But my books find the readers they're meant to find anyways. So I would think if you, especially if you're writing like genre and very commercial, don't worry about it. If your goal is like literary and stars and very prestigious awards, okay, like clearly that's going to be the goal, but don't act like that's make or break for your career. And the other one I would say, my second series, Realm Breaker, did not do anywhere near as well as the Red Queen series, largely because the Red Queen series, it felt like, no pun intended, a little bit lightning in the bottle, and it's really hard to either repeat or escalate from something that
Mm.
big. The goal is just to keep moving forward. But I remember and still like being a little in my head about like, oh, this is a failure because I didn't do better than the one before. But that's just not how publishing works. It's very much not linear for most people.
How many
Obviously,
times have you watched that Elizabeth Gilbert TED Talk
oh,
where
I
she,
haven't read it all.
oh my
This is
God, she has a brilliant TED Talk where she talks about Eat, Pray, Love and how she said that she has to reckon with the fact, and I'm not saying this is true of you, I'm just
no,
saying
no,
this
but
is
that is
Elizabeth
very
Gilbert's, but that she said, I'm reckoning with, I had to long ago accept the fact that my greatest success is behind me. And
yeah,
yet I'm still going to do this work.
right, right. Yeah, that's very, very true. I haven't reckoned with that yet. I still, you look at every book like a lottery ticket and you're always hoping for the level up. That's
Sure.
what we call it is like this was so and so's level up book. This was when they went
Oh,
from
yeah.
this
Yeah.
tier to this tier or
Hmm.
this space to this space. Always looking for the level up book. And of course, you're always hoping your next book is your best book. And you're always hoping the book you just wrote is the best of the books that you've already written. And I do feel like that. That is also a little nice marker of success is while Realm Breaker was not selling the same way Red Queen did, it still found a wonderful audience. And I feel like those books were better written than the Red Queen books. That can be frustrating to be like, but these books are better. So, like, what? But that's subjective to the reader.
Hmm. And what was a make or break moment for you?
Ooh, the make or break, the biggest one was after I had moved home following graduation, and it was October of 2012. And I was about halfway through drafting Red Queen, the first
Mm.
draft. And halfway through, I started to slow down. I started to question why the fuck am I doing this? I put all my eggs in this one basket. I've essentially thrown away this very expensive education, and the loans are going to kick in like 8 months. I, interned in Los Angeles and I was working towards a career in film as a screenwriter. And now, how am I back in dinky ass East Long Meadow in my parents' house, writing at the coffee table every day on a book that's probably going to go nowhere and isn't that good? And I stopped. And that halfway moment was very much like, okay, either you're going to finish
Mm.
and see this through, or you're going to quit and you're going to have to figure out something else. And I don't know what that thing is going to be. And I remember several things happened. My dad and my best friend at the time had been reading the book chapter by chapter. And when I slowed down and wasn't sending chapters as regularly, both of them were like, well, can you tell me how it ends if you're not going to finish it? Because I really want to know how it ends. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll write it. But I remember this very clearly. I went back and I read Catching Fire, the second Hunger Games book, which is my favorite of the trilogy. And that sort of refilled the well. I almost felt like the fuel get lit inside me of, no, I love doing this and I want to do this and I want to give this feeling to somebody else and make this for somebody else. And this is what I am meant to be doing. And I remember I went back to the draft and I knocked it out and it was done in January. And I had signed with my agent in February and it was sold in April. And it was very much like that feels like the sliding doors moment of my life. I
You
think I was
can edit
applying.
a bad draft. You cannot edit nothing.
Yeah. Yes. You're so much more valuable to have an imperfect full draft than it is
Hmm.
to have a perfect chapter one.
Hmm. I want to talk about internet discourse.
Oh, just that. Just
It is
that.
it is often said that audiences, readers, viewers, anybody who consumes media don't actually care about the capital D discourse as much as social media makes us believe they care.
Yeah.
From
It's a
your
percentage of a
experience,
percentage. Yeah. Yes. No,
how real is online chatter from your perspective?
it it's gotten bigger because TikTok
Mm-hmm.
and Book Talk has expanded the amount of people who are in our orbit, in our spheres, who are present online and do see online information. However, if you actually look at the numbers, like comparing, say, your sales to your followers, you're going to see it's a smaller percentage by a lot.
I cannot stress, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I cannot stress to people enough how a follower count or virality on a video does not translate to the sales that you think they will.
Yes, yes. And that goes both ways too, where it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I've sold millions of books. Like, I should have millions of
I have
followers.
358
No,
followers. I remember
no.
there was a guy who hit Oprah's book list and
Mhm.
she did like a whole big thing on him and like, like making her, her whole personality for like a couple months like she did. And like I remember looking at his Instagram the day she did her first post and it had like
Yeah,
700 followers. And I was
yeah.
like, see, a follower count doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything in either direction.
Hmm.
And a lot of us, kind of take comfort in the fact that sometimes things are really a storm in a teacup. It does take a lot for it to push it into the more like the layman's awareness. Like the TikTok or the book talk hockey romance thing. That was the only thing I've seen that has actually reached my friends who are not at all tapped into the book sphere
Oh,
whatsoever.
really?
Like guy friends of mine were like, "Hey, ESPN just ran something about like book talk. What's going on?" And I had to be like, "Oh, okay, here's what's going on." And yeah, it takes a lot to push it into the general awareness. But that's the same for there are maybe like 4 authors who are actually famous.
Well,
I would say actually 3 who could walk down the street
well, that's
and be
true.
recognized
That's true. Unless you're
by
famous for like other things as
right,
well.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. Specifically, if you are just famous for being an author, like I think most people don't know what Colleen Hoover looks like, and she sold more books than the Bible the other
I
year.
think a lot of people saw Colleen Hoover for the first time in a Blake Lively social media post this past week,
Yes.
and that was it. And
And
I think,
there's actually something nice to that of like you can be like super successful and super famous, but then
yeah.
like live a normal life for the most part. Like Stephen King would get
And
stopped on the street.
yeah.
George R. R. Martin would get stopped on the street. J.K. Rowling would get stopped on the street, and hopefully someone would give her a
She got
trans.
stopped on Twitter. She hadn't
She got
posted in
stopped.
like 12 days.
Give Amani Khalif another gold medal
A second gold
for
medal, as
being the
many
first.
gold medals as she wants.
I saw this post. It was like give her another gold medal for being the first person to shut her up.
So
Anyway,
I wanted to ask that question because I like telling people like a very good day on social media is not going to make your career. A very
right,
bad day on social
right,
media is not going to break your career.
right.
Neither of those things is gonna be it.
Yes, unless it's like, oh, you were actually like a bigot or something. Like
Well,
it's
yes. Yeah.
the punishment should usually fit the crime.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does not. Sometimes we've definitely seen really unfairness and sort of witch hunts and things that unfold in ways where you're like, what the fuck? Some of the I can't even remember what it was, but it was like someone in Facebook groups was like making fake
Facebook.
accounts and sabotaging people, and it was in like the Facebook groups, and I'm like, one, who's in a
Who's on
Facebook group?
Facebook?
Two, don't you have like things to be doing at home? Like go walk your dog. Like what are you doing here? This is very neckbeard coded. Like this is the
I am always shocked when I hear people are like, and I know that I don't know if this is naivete. I don't think I'm that old, but I've always been this naive person. I think when people are like, oh, they made a bunch of alt accounts, or oh, I just read about this on my alt account. I'm like, what alt account? People are like, oh,
I
well,
have
everybody has alt. I'm like, literally, I just
I like
have
have
the
my old Reddit. That's all.
I'm like, I just have the one that I can keep up with, and that's where all the thoughts go,
Yes,
or a group chat
that's
or a
so
DM.
here.
But yeah, I don't. I'm like, people have oh, well, I've got like 12. That's so much time.
That's too many.
That's so much
That's
time.
too many. I don't like that.
We
Nope.
have a mutual friend in Bridget Kemmerer.
Yes,
Y
she is lovely, and she's someone I
yes.
would recommend, especially aspiring
Mhm.
writers or debuts. Definitely follow her. She is dropping pearls of wisdom left, right, and center, and she will also take time out of her own day to speak to you, which quite frankly, I won't do.
My husband and I are going to go hang out with her in a few weeks
Oh,
in
fun!
Milwaukee at
Oh, that's
Romance
great.
Con, which I'm
Oh,
apparently in
lovely.
now. So there's that, even though I'm not a romance
My
author.
God. I'm going to a romantasy convention in Los Angeles in, I want to say this coming February, and I'm really excited for it, but I'm also like, I've never been to, I went to RT a long, long time ago, but I've never been to uh a convention where it's like partially indie, partially trad, and I'm sort of like, wait, I know how much work goes into these
Yeah,
conventions.
yeah,
I know how little work for me, at least, like I show up.
yeah.
The publisher does everything for me. I show up. So I'm a little
Uh-huh.
like, I'm not bringing a cashier. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I'm very
I have
excited.
to sell the book. I don't think so.
I get to go hang out with her. But I told her that you were going to come on, and I said, "Do you have any questions for her?" So she sent over a couple of questions. As these are questions from Bridget to you
Oh my God, that's so
for your
fun.
readers. I thought you would enjoy this.
I do enjoy
So
this.
from Bridget, they say that every story, and I like this first question because you talk about this a lot. It's
Okay.
on the topic of like inspiration and stuff.
Okay.
They say that every story has already been written, and there are obviously works that have been inspired by others. Do you feel there's a point where inspiration goes too far?
Yes, and she knows my thoughts on this. There absolutely is. I do think we all draw from the same well, and I do think if you give five different authors the same prompt or the same sort of parameters of a story, you are still going to get five different stories.
Mhm.
I think when I saw this somewhere else, actually, I think when a reader is reading your book and is distracted by how much they were reminded of something else, that is when it crosses the line. But that's also a subjective line. Some readers are like, I just want more of the thing that I like, and I don't care that this is essentially fan fiction or whatever. So it's a little murky, that line. The line is going to be sharper for, say, someone who created something that then spawned something else. And obviously they're going to feel territorial about their work. It is a hard thing to look at because, and I remember that there was something going on with like Entangled and Tracy Wolf and whatever. It's really, really difficult to pursue that legally if you feel like there's a copyright infringement issue, especially in like the creative world. You almost will never win that battle, regardless of whether or not someone reason is like, oh, this is very clearly taken from or inspired by, to past the point of acceptability. It's just very hard to prove legally. And so it's like it's legal, like you can do it. No one's gonna stop you. No policeman's gonna show up on your door. Is it ethical? That's more of a question for yourself. But I think a good measurement, unfortunately, this happens, way down the road, is the reader distracted by
Mhm.
how much they are thinking of something else? Are they thinking, I might as well just go read the other thing because it did it in a way that was at least unique or worked better or whatever? So it is hard. But personally, like I am so inspired by all of the stuff that I love. Like Realmbreaker is very clearly my love letter to the Lord of the Rings, and Red Queen, I always said, was like Hunger Games meets X-Men meets Game of Thrones. I'm throwing in all the things that I love, but you got to find your own spin on it. When it sort of feels like somebody's going down a checklist and you're like, wait, you have this, and this, like pick two. Don't pick 10. That's
This
where
is
it's
Red Queen School for Gifted Youngsters. This
like,
is
Bowman and I did do a crossover, so that was approved. But yeah,
yeah.
it's a hard, it's a very murky line. I think that line shifts. It also depends, on the skill of the author too. Someone really, really talented could do a very, very deeply inspired piece of work, but it's going to feel different, or it's going to
Mhm.
have that author's voice in it versus someone who is not as skilled and is really just kind of chameleoning and uh just repeating what someone else has
Well,
done.
and
So
we've seen
it's
really
hard. You
successful
don't know it until
examples. We've
Yeah,
seen
you
really
don't know.
successful examples of that with somebody like Madeline Miller. You know,
Mhm,
Song of
mhm.
she didn't invent the Iliad and the Odyssey,
Right,
but she
right, and
basically
that's
reinvented it. I mean, for a new audience, taking an
yeah.
expertise, a new voice, and all of that. It's a whole different thing. But you talked a lot about like the difference between, well, is this legal or is this ethical? I will say one of those leads to a longer career. One of those leads to people wanting to work with you. And
Depends. And it depends on the publisher because sometimes it's like, well, if it's sold, it's sold. And someone will still work with you. And that is something I know a lot of us have looked at on the traditional publishing side is seeing how many publishers are kind of gravitating towards fan fiction, for example. And it's sort of like this is a slippery slope, and we're not really sure where the slope is going to go, and we're not really sure how this is going to play out. So there's like the Draco Hermione fanfic
Mhm.
Manacled, and that has been bought and is being sort of reworked so that it can be legally sold. It's like personally, if I was
That's
in that
not a set of
position,
attorneys I would ever want to go up
right.
against.
That too, I'm like, oh God, that seems like an uphill battle that you will not win. And I'm not
Yeah.
really sure.
I didn't know it got bought.
It got bought, it got
How does
bought,
that even get purchased?
got bought for a lot of money. Um,
Good Lord.
that's something that where I was sort of like, I'm more nervous for
How
the
does that deal
author
even
because
work?
if a lawsuit comes, the author is more at risk than the
Oh,
public.
yeah. Yeah.
And not so much like they'll both be sued. But the publisher has so much more protection and
Yeah.
so much, they have a war chest, they have lawyers. The author in these situations, I worry about authors being kind of hung out to dry by publishers who are looking to make sales for a year and then a lawsuit shuts it down. That's what I have really started to worry about with this slippery slope of inspired by fan fiction.
Well,
I think we're gonna hit a
and
wall with
and
that.
again, I've told you, you know, my brain immediately thinks of the 10 things that could go wrong is somebody saying, okay, well, this fan fiction got purchased, so that means I'm okay to self-publish mine. So that means I'm okay to make money off of mine. So that mean I mean, so I think that there's precedent there and yada yada, even
Yes.
though there's not, but there kind of is, and they might have a
And
point. And
it's also sort of reducing not so much by the writers themselves, but by more of the community. We're seeing people who are selling bound fan fiction that isn't even fan fiction they wrote, which I'm like insane over this. But I'm a big supporter of the fan fiction community. I cut my teeth writing fan fiction. This is
mhm,
how some of my first forays into creative writing was through fan fiction. I love fan fiction. This is how you kill fan fiction,
mhm,
is people who are kind of spitting in the face of what is already pretty murky legally, but the creative world is sort of like, it's fine because they want to make a quick buck. These people who are like, well, this fan fiction is so well received. I'm gonna sell it because they
mhm.
don't actually own it. And I can just say, well, it's just a rebind and blah, 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 blah. It's bullshit. And it's how you get fan fiction shut down. And so these things all kind of go hand in hand with this. Listen, I'm all about commercialization. I'm all about capitalism, but it feels like we're reaching a tipping point in the commercialization of creativity.
Mm,
And there's like this need for immediacy, and I need to buy it now. I need to make the money now. I need to do it up front now, 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 now. And
mhm.
there's not really thought for the long-term practice and how do I survive long-term doing this. So like someone who's binding someone else's fan fiction and selling it to you, they're going to make a couple $100 and they're going to get the website shut down and then they're going to move and they're going to do it again and again and again. The same thing is happening with a lot of these like AI written ebooks that they're then using clickbots to earn pennies on Kindle. It's very strange what we're sort of up against, and we're just like, we want to write books, man. What the hell?
Second question from Bridget. Mhm. What are
We
some
a rabbit hole, Bridget.
what are some mistakes that you see newer authors make?
I definitely think the not having a group chat or not having people in your circle who are both at like the tier you are at, so you guys
Mhm,
can commiserate and talk about, what's your experience, what's my experience, and you have the same sort of space for each other.
mhm,
It can be more difficult when you're I see a lot of people critiquing, like, I was such good friends with this person and then their career took off and they had no more time for me. And sometimes that's like, oh, that sucks. That was really shitty behavior on their part. And sometimes it's like their life changed in a certain way,
Yeah.
or like they got married, they had a baby,
Hmm.
they're working full time. Like people don't owe you their time,
Hmm.
and you take that for what it is. So I would say the big mistake is one, not having your trusted circle of people who are in this industry, but also only having people who are in this industry. I think that is a real detriment to a lot of people. And again, you can tell when it's almost in the way, it's almost like when you can tell someone's chronically online. It's the same sort of thing. So those would, I would say, be two big mistakes. And another one, and this is more to traditionally publishing, like that sort of sphere of things, but remembering that it is a business and people are there to make money. You should protect yourself. Your publisher is your colleague, not your friend. And keep that in mind always. Even if you guys have a great relationship, even if you love these people and you do enjoy them, always keep in mind it is a business. There will be issues. Don't take it personal and protect yourself. Don't,
You know, one of the things people tend to tell newer authors is don't go read, like, don't go to Goodreads, don't go to Amazon reviews. And
oh, I
you've actually quite famously said that you do. You go hit up, you're living in those Goodreads reviews
yeah, when I'm
for
in
the
the
first 30
headspace,
days,
do it.
right?
Yes, the first like month-ish. Sometimes I'm like, oh, how is, because I'll see like an uptick in, say, like, oh, a post or went viral, or suddenly people are talking about this book more. Let me go see if it's like hit over there. That's valuable to me. I think it's all about being in the right headspace to
Hmm.
read reviews. I do like reviews. I do find them helpful. And part of my college experience, like I did a screenwriting BFA, and part of that was really intense workshop style classes. And one of the things they are trying to teach you, not necessarily just how to tell a story, but how to take criticism.
How
Like
to
that was
take criticism.
honestly a thing,
Yeah.
is developing the thicker skin and not just being able to take criticism, but being able to use criticism and identify what is good critique and what is bad critique, what is useful to you and what is not. And the stuff that is not useful to you, you have to just let it go.
Mhm.
So I feel like I had a bit of a primer on how to work with that. Also, coming from the fan fiction space, nothing's ever going to be as bad as a flame on fanfiction.net. So I felt prepped. But yeah, reading reviews doesn't bother me as long as you don't interact with them. And I know I echo pretty much every other author when I say don't like tag us in shit talk or like a review where you really did not like the book, because we got to be in the headspace to see it. And it
And
sucks when someone
I'm
knocks
just
on your door and
I'm
says, I
assuming
hate
that
you.
people who might want to become authors might tune into this interview. So if you've never seen me say it anywhere ever, I'm going to say it here. Do not go to Goodreads or the Amazon reviews or Storygraph or whatever. Get your feelings hurt and then come back to Maine and make that everybody's problem. But if somebody comes to social media is a shared space.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're tagged, if it's sent to you. Now, some people search their name.
Uh,
I've done that.
oh, really?
Just to keep an eye on things, just to be like, hope nobody's yelling at me today. Um, that that is also like you're choosing to enter that space.
Yes. Yeah. If you
That's
go there and you get your feelings hurt, you
on
did
you.
that.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Yep.
I want to ask. I want to wrap up because I know that we're coming up on time, and I'm so sorry about that. I do.
No worries.
I have a few just like quick questions. I thought that
Right.
would be fun right here at the end. Do you draft and edit in the same place?
No. Like physically or
Yeah,
program? Oh, physically.
both. Both.
Okay, so program wise, I draft in Scrivener, and I love Scrivener. It is fantastic, especially if you're a genre writer who needs to keep a lot of notes, a lot of research, a lot of like world building documents all in one space. It's all in one save file, it's all in one window. I love it. You can break down your chapters and access everything versus having a really long Word document or a bunch of different Word documents. Once I have finished the first draft, it goes into Microsoft Word because that is industry standard for editing. We have to use track changes. I
Hate
hate it.
that so
I
much.
hate it. I want someone to invent a better program that is industry standard on the trad publishing side of things, especially because if you're me and you're writing a 180,000 word fantasy novel with spell check running, with names that a spell check is flagging on every page, and then you start running track changes for 1, 2, 3 drafts, it just doesn't run anymore. Word is not designed for us. It's not.
No,
And I know there are plenty of people who are like, well, I write in Google Docs. And I'm like, that's also not feasible. Like
no.
Google Docs starts to glitch after like 12 pages. What the hell do you mean you're writing in Google Docs? Also, I'm a bit of a Luddite and I don't trust it. And
You save your draft on a flash drive.
I also
I would
utilize
be
the cloud,
my
right?
anxiety. I could not, ma'am.
I know. And I save it on the actual thing too. And I know there's probably a way for me to like cloud between them, but I can't figure it out. Whatever. Um,
Yeah, but is it physical? Your physical space is everything here in this
in this
office?
office, for the most part, yes. I would like to work at coffee shops more, but I feel guilty leaving my dog. And I kind of just need to zone and trance and be in my space. I have like a riser, so I'm now in the port of my health journey where I can't sit for too long.
Oh, you're at a
I
standing
have,
desk right now.
yeah,
I
this is
passed
my
that a long
sitting
time
for the
ago.
day. So I have a timer, and that's very helpful just to also to tell me when to sit stand, but giving me like that boost of, okay, you got 15 minutes left. Don't go to Google. Don't go to Chrome. Don't leave the Word document. You've got this much more time left. But usually I'm in here in my office towards the end of a draft when I'm in like motor mode because I accelerate. I'm like Usain Bolt. I accelerate and I get to like those 5, 8, 10,000 word days
Mm,
towards the end when I'm really up against the
sure.
deadline. I'm usually on the laptop, horizontal on the couch with like an ergonomic pillow situation that I have
That's me
made.
in my hammock out back. When I'm
Yeah.
drafting,
And
I'm in my hammock if I can be. Yeah.
I feel like someone in the Matrix, like I'm plugged in. I want one of those like ergo zero grav desks. That would be really cool. But yeah, at that point, it's like whatever I need to do to make it work. I kind of have to move around because I'm pulling like 12, 14-hour writing days. And you cannot be in the same space for that.
What's a
I
must
do
have to keep you on track? And is it your giant hair clips?
My hair clips are everywhere, but no, I really do like the timer. I
Mm,
actually went to an author like lunch a couple months ago with some other writer friends who live in LA, and they're much more social. Like they're more, you're not here because you're hard drafting, you're here because you're in copy edits and you can chit chat a little bit. And I didn't really understand that. And I pulled my timer out of my bag and I was like, okay, 30 minutes. When the 30 minutes beeps, we can talk. And they were like,
I bet you were popular that day.
who let the warden in here? To be fair, they were
Are
like,
your
oh,
parents teachers, Victoria? Or
I got my stickers. I got my check pluses and my gold stars. I wasn't allowed in the house in the summer unless I was doing a workbook. We had to be
oh
outside.
yeah, go outside. I
Yeah,
was raised in the country. Go outside, drink from a
yeah,
hose, be
figure it
outside.
out. Yes. There's nothing like hose water. I would say my timer is very, very helpful, but just being in my space, with more so knowing that I have nothing else on my plate.
Mm,
That is very, very valuable to me. If I have a meeting at like 1 o'clock, my day's ruined. And then I will actually try and stack, times when I have to leave my house, errands, appointments, all on one day so I don't like lose that day. It takes a
mhm.
lot for this machine. She's creaky. She needs to be greased. So not having anything on my plate, knowing that all I have to do is write is probably the most valuable thing to me. And that's not really realistic for most lifestyles. I don't have a child, as you can tell.
I've seen that child of yours. She's precious.
Yes, she's
How is
wonderful.
she? Is she okay? Is she better?
She's doing good. So yeah, she's got this like new diagnosis that where hopefully it can be controlled by diet.
How old is
And
she?
she is 7.5.
Okay.
And yeah. So I feel like it's very Kardashian of her to like need B12 injections and fancy food. She's not on the
Sure.
fanciest food. We were able to get her onto the step below, like the Just Food for Dogs human grade food. Thank God.
Okay.
It was going to be like very expensive to feed
Oh,
her.
I was on the expensive food for with my dog who passed away last November. It is expensive.
Yeah. So we're
Luckily,
hoping.
I'm married to a vet, so we did get a
Oh
discount.
yeah, you got the discount. But right now we have the really stinky
Yeah.
wet canned food, which she
Oh
loves,
yeah.
and she seems to be doing pretty great. So we're fingers crossed, hopeful that it is good. But she's on an 8-week food trial, which sucks because she my husband makes a peanut butter jelly sandwich every day for lunch. And she sits there drooling, waiting for her lick of peanut butter, which she used to always get. And now she can't have anything but the food so that we can basically eliminate and then start adding things back in.
Oh, okay.
She's just like, what the fuck? Why won't you give me the peanut butter? Why won't you give me the blueberry? We don't even do like treats. It's all banana, blueberry, peanut butter. It's not crazy treats. So I baked the wet food into treats and now we keep it in the freezer. My husband came home and he's like, the house smells like disgusting dog food. I'm ordering a shitty toaster oven and we can do this outside.
I would do some of that stuff, but my husband makes fun of me. He's like, you don't need to do that. That's not going to make any difference to her whatsoever. It's not going to make any difference. And I'm like, but it would make me feel better. He's like, oh
Right.
God.
So I'm like, we will not give you the peanut butter, but you are in treat mode. So we will give you a treat of your old food,
Oh
of
yeah,
your
yeah.
approved food.
Are
Yeah.
you an industry plant?
I wish. I wish. It would be a lot easier if I was. Actually, that was one of the more flattering things I've ever heard is I read the comments on like a Deadline article about me and someone said she's a hired actress. And I was like, oh my God. So you think I'm pretty?
What is the wildest thing you've ever seen written about you? What's the wildest thing? Okay. What's the wildest thing that's ever been written about you that you were like, wait, how did you know that? Because that's actually true. And what's the wildest thing that you were like, well, I wish that were true.
Oh man. Well, I really wish the Nepo baby thing was true. I really wish there's
Sure.
a lot of assumptions
Yeah.
that like I am a Nepo baby or that I come from wealth. And I'm like, that would be so awesome if
I
I
have
was
started to get that because people see
so
a follower
jealous.
count and they just assume for
Right.
weird, I do not understand. But they just assume like that I'm rich. And I'm like,
And don't get me wrong, like the way that our
do you think
industry,
Instagram sends me a paycheck?
yes, don't the way that our industry is set up is that it is more conducive to people of means because writing a
Yes.
book on
Oh
spec, like
yeah.
you have to be in a certain phase of life or
Yeah.
have a certain level of support to be able to do that. So yes, there is more of a selection into that. And it looks fun. Having a rich family looks,
Oh fun.
but no, my parents are retired school teachers. And my dad, like he does a lot of quote like work for me now, but he won't let me pay him, which is nice. So I'm taking him on a safari next month, and that's how
Fun.
I get to pay him. But I got an Mpox vaccine yesterday, and I have a nice rash.
Ooh.
I know.
Um, you are making a change going from young adult to adult.
Yes.
You asked folks for advice. We talked about our mutual friend Bridget. Um, I am also making a change. I'm going from nonfiction and poetry into young adult. So you asked others for advice. This is a great opportunity for me to be very self-serving right now. What advice would you give me going into young adult?
Well, you're also making a double hop because you're
Yeah,
going from nonfiction, which is a
yeah,
completely other
yeah,
half, into YA,
yeah,
whereas I'm just sort of going to a different age
yeah.
group.
Your young adult readers are just now adults.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And damn, I would say it's also interesting because YA is a little bit the Wild West, and anyone who is going to tell you advice, it's going to be so subjective, and so
Uh-huh.
some of it's going to be, yeah, that applies for you, but it may not apply for the next person. That's really difficult. I think there is, for as much as people are panicking and sort of like, there's no market for YA. Teenagers don't want true YA anymore. They want like upper level
Oh, I did. That's
fantasy
not
and
what I'm hearing.
whatever.
I'm hearing that teenagers are hungry for true
Right.
YA these
That's what
days.
I'm saying is I think that is actually a super underserviced
Yeah.
group. They're making a big mistake, kind of leaving readers from the ages of 13 to 16 kind of out in the cold and not servicing them. And I think that's such a one, a bad business decision, and two, just like bad on a societal level, because this is how we make readers, and lifelong readers are proven to be more adjusted and empathetic people. So for sure, like let's service people who are big readers now, but we need to be investing in people who are going to become readers. So I would hope that you don't feel discouraged by a lot of like publishers now who are saying we need this to be upper level, we need this to be romanticy, we need this to be XYZ, because that's what's hitting right now.
I
The
actually haven't gotten to, we've talked about this privately, but I haven't gotten to talk about this publicly because my book only just now got announced because these things take forever. But what's so funny is my book actually went out on two rounds of submission. The first was last fall,
Hmm.
And we did because of social media. My agency was like, let's swing for some of those bigger fences, and I wanted a smaller fence because
Right.
I remember what it was like. I was at Simon for my last book, and I remember feeling like a very tiny fish in a very big pond, and I felt very lost, and I did not want that this time around. I wanted my hand held as I crossed the street. Hand held. But we went out, we got a handful of rejections, and it was all just like, yeah, they wanted it to be, they wanted it pushed up. Could it be romanticy? Could it be this? Could it be, and all of that? And I was like, oh, this isn't right. We need to pull
Yeah.
this. So we pulled it, retooled it. I said, no, no, no. Okay, this is a true young adult. This is for kids, people their age ends in teen or
Mhm.
elve. So, and we resent it out and then it sold in 10 days. But yeah, I was like, that's kind of going back to your thing earlier about rejection being a gift. Like, I'm kind of glad that it didn't go in that first round. I mean, we didn't get very many rejections before we decided to, no, this is not going the way we want it to. But I'm glad that it didn't go that way because I have no idea what this book would have become had I needed to turn it into something else.
One thing, and this is advice I've heard for 11 years now, and I do think it is one of the only pieces that has not changed, is that traditional publishing is slow.
Mm.
And there's not really much point in chasing trends because if you sold a book today, it wouldn't come out for at least a year and a half, if not 2 years. So what is hitting today probably won't have the same effect 2 years from now. It'd be great in the submission process and to like get a shiny sale, but they don't know what's going to be the thing in 2 years. And I do think this goes back to the purchasing of fan fiction and then also a lot of indie books that have blown up is because those books are things that traditional publishing can get out a lot quicker. They can cut down on that actual drafting time, editing time. They know they're pretty much ready for consumption and have an audience built in. So this is traditional publishing's way of actually being able to jump on a trend, which they've never been able to do before. But when it comes to you actually writing a book on spec, it's different.
That's all my questions. So the only other thing that I have for you is I think your fans would shank me if I didn't ask. The Red Queen adaptation, how's that going?
Can't say. Not much I can say, unfortunately. I will say I am waiting for Bridget to talk about her submission packet because she gave me her submission packet that I could use as sort of a model for my own submission packet that I built when we went on submission and like how she structured it with the world and the premise and the pitch. I've been telling her, can you make a video about this?
I
Because I
did
don't want to
too.
do it
She
because it's
did just send me,
yours.
I got to read the first part of the new book. She sent me chapters and I got to send some feedback on that. But I told her the same thing. I was like, you need to get on social media. You need
She
to
is,
do more
she
of
is, and
this.
I've talked about it a couple times, and I'm like, Bridget, I'm gonna tag you in this video. Respond to it.
I will come to your house. I will film it for you. I will.
I know you're busy with your wonderful family, but
She's always in the car. She is
Mhm.
like a mom. I love
Yes,
it. Yeah.
yes, and she's
Yeah.
mom to us all.
Victoria Aveyard, it has been a privilege to get to
Thank
share some
you.
space with you. If folks want to follow you on social media, how do they do that?
It's just my name at Victoria Aveyard on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and no more Twitter.
I'm so jealous. So
Join
jealous.
us.
What?
Nobody's left. Like I remember I don't have an account anymore, but when I clicked on it the other day and it was just tire fire.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's gross. Oh, it's disgusting. And
Gross. I don't
I
know
don't
what
like going on there, but it's,
it
my
used to
my
be so beautiful, Sunday nights
yeah.
after an episode of Game of Thrones, everyone's making
Oh
jokes.
yeah. Yeah. Threads is okay. It's not the same, but it's
Not the
okay. It
same.
scratches the itch.
It does, it does. One last thing I will say about
Yeah.
Threads, and we talk about this a lot on Threads and you and I, that there's always that sort of miscommunication,
Mm.
especially because you have a lot of people looking for advice on publishing, and you have traditionally published authors and indie published authors talking about the same thing but it's a different
But different
conversation.
context, different
Yeah, they get
spaces. Yeah.
different context. The wires get crossed. I will say, I'm kind of figuring out that the line isn't traditionally published versus indie published, it's career versus hobby. That is where I'm really seeing the advice that I think, and again, when you're choosing, what path do I want to be? What is my ultimate goal? If you are someone who wants to write as a hobby, there's going to be a lot of advice that's good for you and a lot of advice
Mhm.
that's not going to apply to you, that's actually going to like make this very overwhelming for you. But if you are someone who is looking to make a career out of this, there is a lot of advice out there from hobby writers that is really going to harm you. And I think that's where we see a lot of those sort of takes where it's like, well, if you're going to a festival hoping to make money, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And you're just like, tell me someone else supports you without telling me someone else supports you. Like a lot of us are doing this as our job.
Yeah.
So I think that
I don't
is
work for free.
right. So when you're looking at advice and wondering, is this going to be of value to me? I think that is something to really look at, not necessarily indie versus trad, but
Yeah.
is this person's career? Not necessarily is this their way that they solely support themselves, but are they approaching this as a job, as a business, or are they approaching this as something fun that they do? And that is going to really help you figure out what advice is going to be useful to you when you know that.
Yeah, there's a way that people move through the world where it's like, well, I'm taking this just a little bit more seriously than other people. And you can always
Yes.
tell that. What one last plug? What's the new book? Not the one that you can't announce. I know
One that I
but
can't
what
announce.
the
I cannot
latest the
say
finale of Realm Breaker was
Fate Breaker. Fate
Fate
Breaker came
Breaker.
out this past February. And so that trilogy is totally finished and ready to binge. It's my love letter to Lord of the Rings. It's sort of my question about what would have happened if the Fellowship of the Ring failed, but the world still needs saving. Who's the B team? And I had a lot of fun putting together that B team.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been a privilege.
Thank you so much. I was so happy to chat with you.